Mom didn't cry. She didn't slam the phone. She didn't even ask why. She just said, "A backyard." "Really, Julia? That's not a real wedding. That's a garden party for poor people." Then she hung up. That was the moment I knew she wouldn't come. Not because she was sick, not because the date didn't work, not even because of some family emergency. She wouldn't come because my wedding in her eyes wasn't worth showing up for. It wasn't big enough. It wasn't showy enough. It didn't offer her a stage. I sat on our porch for a long time after that call the old wood, pressing into the backs of my thighs, the winter air cutting through my sweatshirt. My fingers held the phone like it might still ring, like she might call back and say it was a joke or that she didn't mean it. But the silence just settled in dense and immovable. Malik came out eventually carrying 2 mugs of tea. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He just handed me the mug and sat beside me, letting the steam rise between us like a curtain of quiet understanding. "She said no," I finally murmured. He nodded. "Because it's in the backyard," I managed a small, bitter laugh. "Because it's not a ballroom. No chandeliers. No monogrammed napkins. No plated beef tenderloin with wine pairings. It doesn't match what she pictured when she imagined the day her daughter got married." "She imagined herself in it," he said after a pause. That landed. It wasn't about me. It never was. Mom didn't ask about the lighting design I spent 6 months building from scratch, recycled glass bottles and hundreds of tiny LED bulbs I wired by hand. She didn't ask about the way we turned our backyard into a lantern-lit grove, how we dug and replanted the wildflower beds ourselves. She didn't ask why we were limiting it to 25 guests or what it meant to us to share vows where we built our life, not some place rented by the hour. She only asked once weeks earlier with a scoff. "You're not doing it potluck style, are you?" She didn't wait for an answer. It's strange, isn't it? The way some people shrink a wedding down to its optics. My mother didn't care who I was marrying. She cared what people would say, what they'd wear, what kind of photos would show up on Facebook. She didn't want to be part of my wedding. She wanted to be seen. I gave her an invitation anyway, printed not emailed, embossed, lavender-scented, tied with silk thread. No RSVP ever came. The morning it arrived, she texted me only once. "Looks like something a homeschooler made." I almost laughed. She'd probably forgotten I was homeschooled for 3 years at her request. What do you do when the person who raised you tells you without screaming, without cursing, that your life doesn't measure up? What do you do when your mother decides your most meaningful day isn't even worth an Uber ride? You grieve. Then you keep going. You hang the lights, you press your dress, you rewrite your vows, and you record everything. The space where I used to exist in my mother's world had always been conditional. I was the second daughter, the quieter one. The one who wore her sister's hand-me-downs and never once asked why the family photo albums had entire pages without me in them. At Rachel's wedding, the big one, the one Mom still brags about to anyone with a book club or a holiday newsletter, I wasn't a bridesmaid. I wasn't even seated with the family. I was stationed behind the floral archway holding a clipboard and a walkie-talkie, making sure the buffet didn't run out of crab cakes and that the violinist didn't start too early. I remember the shoes I wore that day, cheap flats from a clearance bin, blisters by the first dance. I remember Rachel's dress, hand-beaded imported silk, cost more than my college tuition, and how Mom adjusted the train just before the ceremony, tears in her eyes, like she was crowning royalty. "You'll get your turn," she whispered when I tried to step into the room for a photo. My turn never came. What I got instead were tasks. Carry this, check that, be useful. Don't be in the way. The only picture I appear in from that entire wedding weekend is a blurry side profile shot where I'm wiping down the cake table in the background. Someone once tagged me in it and called me the help. I laughed. I didn't correct them. By then, I'd learned my place. So when I told Mom I was planning something small, intimate outdoors, no bridal party, no speeches, just vows and shared bread, she blinked. "Small," she repeated like I'd said illegal. She pursed her lips. "That's disappointing, Julia. Don't you want something people will remember?" I wanted something I would remember. I wanted the people I loved, the man I'd chosen. Music under open sky. Plates passed hand to hand instead of cold chicken delivered by servers with name tags. I didn't need chandeliers. I didn't need a $10,000 cake. But Mom's face told me I'd already failed, that my choices embarrassed her, that I not the wedding, not the scale, but I was too small. Rachel called a week later. I thought maybe she was reaching out trying to bridge the growing silence. Instead, she said Mom's worried you're having some kind of breakdown. She says you're sabotaging your own wedding because you're afraid to be the center of attention. I let her talk. I said thank you. I hung up. They didn't understand. They never had. What I was doing wasn't sabotage, it was reclamation. This wedding this day wasn't a stage for my mother. It wasn't a family PR moment. It wasn't a parade for second cousins I hadn't seen since middle school. It was mine. And I wasn't going to plan it like I was asking permission. The morning of my wedding, the sky was gray, but it wasn't threatening. It was the kind of gray that made colors stand out sharper, the kind that turns every flower into a brushstroke. I stood barefoot on the back porch, staring at the rows of mismatched chairs we'd borrowed from neighbors, each tied with scraps of dyed ribbon. The wind picked up slightly, tugging at the paper lanterns we'd strung between the trees. They danced in silence. Inside, Claire was steaming my dress, a soft cream gown, simple with pockets. She'd sewn it herself, every seam a small act of love. Malik's cousin was setting out place cards on the long wooden table. No calligraphy, no gold embossing. Just names printed on seeded paper so each guest could take theirs home and plant something. I walked through the space, slowly touching each chair, each glass jar filled with herbs and field flowers. These weren't placeholders. These were decisions, intentions. Every detail had a reason, and every reason was love. No bridal suite, no makeup team. Just my bathroom mirror and my hands. I twisted my hair up into a loose knot, stuck 2 gardenias behind my ear. When I stepped into the dress, it felt like armor, not to defend myself, but to hold myself together. Claire caught my eye in the reflection. "You okay?" I nodded. "I think so." She came behind me, adjusted a loose strap. "You look like yourself." I've never felt more like myself. At 4:12 p.m., the ceremony began. No prelude. Just birdsong wind, the creak of the gate as the guests entered quietly, respectfully, like stepping into a memory being made in real time. Malik stood at the end of the aisle, which was just the garden path, wearing a navy suit and a crooked smile. His hands shook when he saw me. Mine did too. We didn't have an officiant. We didn't read from a script. We spoke to each other, not to the audience. I don't remember exactly what we said, but I remember what it felt like standing still for the first time in years, like being heard by someone who wasn't waiting for their turn to speak. After we kissed, everyone clapped, not politely, but wholeheartedly. My favorite sound. Dinner was served from giant enamel pots, family style. No servers, no plated service. Just bowls passed down the table, laughter echoing off the ivy-covered fence, someone humming along to a Van Morrison song playing through a borrowed speaker. When night fell, the lights came on, all those hours of wiring and careful placement, and the whole yard glowed like a firefly had taken up residence in each tree. Claire leaned over at one point and whispered, "This looks like a film set." But it didn't. It looked like home. And I knew, even as I laughed and drank and danced barefoot under those lights, that the people who were missing wouldn't see this. Not in real time, not in color, not in context. They wouldn't see the way Malik looked at me during our first dance. They wouldn't hear the toasts from people who actually knew us. They wouldn't taste the lavender lemonade or the fig cake or smell the rosemary smoke from the grill. They'd just see pictures, and by then it would be too late. We hadn't planned to post anything, not right away at least. Our friend Devin, a filmmaker, not a wedding videographer, had offered to document the day as a gift. She shot it like a memory. No wide, sweeping drone shots. No slow-motion veil toss. Just us as we were setting tables, fixing hair, holding hands under string lights. 2 weeks after the wedding, she sent over a short film. 90 seconds long. No narration. No captions. Just music, soft and slow. It began with Malik wiping his palms on his pants before the ceremony, then cut to me tying a ribbon around a jar of wildflowers. The final shot was of us dancing barefoot on the flagstones with the paper lantern swaying above like stars pretending to be close. It made me cry. I watched it 3 times alone in our living room before calling Malik in. He didn't speak while it played. When it ended, he took a long breath and said, "She made it feel like something ancient." I nodded. "Do you think it's petty if I post it?" He smiled, not unkindly. "Sometimes petty is just the truth finally told, so I posted it." Quietly. No hashtags, no captions beyond October 8th. Home. Love. And then I put my phone down and went to bed. By morning, the views had passed 20,000. By noon, it had crossed 50. By dinner, a writer from an indie design blog had messaged me, "Is this your wedding? Can we feature it in our next issue?" I blinked at the message, then reread it. I hadn't expected that. By the end of the week, we were on 2 online magazines and a viral roundup article titled, "The Most Beautiful Backyard Wedding You've Ever Seen." I didn't feel vindicated. Not exactly. I felt seen. In a way, I hadn't expected to be, not by strangers, but by people who hadn't rehearsed a version of me they liked better. And then the calls started. Rachel first. She left a voicemail that started with "wow" and ended with "so. Why didn't you tell us it was going to look like that?" Then a text from my aunt. "That wedding video is all over my feed. I didn't know it was yours. Gorgeous." Then finally my mother. No call. Just a text. One line. "Is this the wedding I wasn't invited to?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Technically, she was invited. She just never bothered to answer. The next morning, she followed up. "You made us look terrible, Julia. People keep asking why we weren't there. You could have warned us." Warned them. I read the message again. Then again. I wasn't sure what part she found most upsetting, the fact that the wedding happened without her, or the fact that it was beautiful. This wasn't about hurt feelings. This was about image. It had always been about image. I didn't respond to her text. Not right away. I wasn't sure what there was to say to someone who was more upset about being left out of the photos than missing the actual moment. But I did respond 3 days later after Malik watched the short film again, this time with a glass of wine in hand and a long silence after it ended. "You should let her see it," he said softly. "Not because she deserves it, but because she clearly doesn't understand what she missed." So I sent a message. "If you want to understand what really happened, come to the studio on Friday at 3. You can watch the full footage. Nothing edited." She wrote back 2 hours later. Fine. She arrived 10 minutes late. Wore pearls. Of course she did. Walked into the little documentary studio like she was touring a charity she might donate to. Polite, cool, detached. I didn't offer small talk. I didn't hug her. Devin had set up the screening room for us, just 2 chairs, a small monitor, and silence. The lights dimmed. I hit play. For the first 5 minutes, she sat with her arms folded. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, waiting for the scoff, the snort, the condescending chuckle. It never came. There was no narrator in the video, no music, just real sound footsteps on gravel glasses clinking, someone laughing from the back row. My voice shaking as I read vows. Malik stumbling over his own. The catch in his throat when he said, "You make me feel like I came home." At minute 12, she shifted. At minute 18, she blinked hard. At minute 20, when the screen showed us dancing under the lights, lanterns glowing like warm planets overhead, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. When the footage ended, I paused the screen. Just a still image of the yard, empty chairs, candle stubs. She didn't speak for a long time. Then it looked expensive. I waited. She cleared her throat. "And you didn't mention it would be like that." I turned to her, my voice steady. "Would it have mattered?" She opened her mouth, closed it. "I invited you," I said. "You declined." "You didn't make it clear." I cut her off. "I wasn't auditioning for your approval, Mom. I was getting married." She looked away. I didn't feel the silence. When she finally met my eyes, her voice was sharper, defensive. "You made us look like we didn't care." I tilted my head. "Did you?" She flinched, a small, almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her mouth. But she didn't answer. I stood, walked to the door, opened it. "Thanks for coming." She lingered, half standing, then sat back down just for a second. "I didn't know it would be beautiful," she said. "That's the point," I replied quietly. "You didn't care to find out. She didn't hug me as she left. I didn't expect her to. But as the door clicked shut behind her, I felt something shift. Not closure, not healing, just clarity. I didn't hear from her for a while after that. No follow-up call, no long text, no backpedaling wrapped in half-hearted apologies. Just silence, which strangely felt more honest than anything else we'd exchanged in years. I didn't go to Thanksgiving. Didn't get an invitation for Christmas. No one said I was cut off, but no one reached out either. It was a quiet exile, the kind that starts as distance and settles into erasure, and I was fine. Not in the triumphant movie ending way, but in the slow grounded way. In the way you realize you don't have to keep chasing a door that never opens. Instead, I poured myself into work, into Malik, into our life. The wedding film, the full version, was picked up by an arts collective in Seattle. They screened it in a gallery show titled Intimate Architecture. We flew up for the opening. People cried watching it. A couple asked if we were actors. I told them no. Just a woman who got married in her backyard because that was where her life had truly begun. 6 months passed. One afternoon, I came home to a small package on our porch. No return address. Just my name in careful cursive I recognized instantly. Inside was a photo. Rachel's wedding. One I'd never seen. I was in the background holding a tray of champagne flutes, my face turned slightly, eyes focused on something just out of frame. On the back of the photo was a note. 2 lines. I looked right past you that day. I see you now. No name, no signature. But I didn't need one. I didn't frame it. Didn't call to say thank you. I just slid it into the back of our wedding album behind a picture of Malik spinning me under the lanterns, both of us laughing barefoot, lit from beneath by the glow of 100 tiny bulbs. That's the story I'll tell if anyone asks about our wedding. I'll tell them we did it our way. I'll tell them we planted wildflowers where people expected roses, that we fed our guests from our hands, not a caterer's checklist, that we danced on gravel and laughed under paper moons, and that we invited everyone who mattered, even the ones who didn't show up. Because in the end, a wedding isn't made by who attends. It's made by who stays. And when I look at the photos now, I don't see what's missing. I see what remained.